Across the Flow FM network, a Flow News 24 update.
Well, good morning. It's Wayne here on the Flow News Desk. We take a look at the topic of high-speed rail. And is it back on the agenda, or are we just purely in a discussion again about something that's just simply going to be too hard to fund? Well, high-speed rail has been on the topic of discussion for the Labor Party. Catherine King, who is the Infrastructure Minister, is in the United Kingdom right now, and she's actually touring with facilities and going on high-speed facilities, having a look at it with the experts in the UK. But when you consider that a study done back in 2013, 10 years ago, estimated that high-speed rail for the east coast of Australia would cost $130 billion. And that building a bullet train, that would take about, let's say, 164 minutes for about 2.5 hours, say, for those to travel between Sydney and Melbourne. Well, there's about a 12-hour tour now, so there is a benefit to that many are talking about with high-speed rail, of getting it down to 2.5 hours, of providing a link to Canberra, and that would reduce the number of flights and so forth. But this becomes a question that the Grattan Institute, its Transport and Cities Program Director, Marion Terrell, she said that it was too expensive to create a high-speed rail network, and that while we love this idea that Australians have always felt like there should be something like that, a bullet train like they have in Japan, it seems to be something that the taxpayers may not be as interested in terms of funding. About $10,000 for every taxpayer it would cost for that funding. But then you look at the report card on budgets, and well, if a Commonwealth Games and the budget for that now is 3 times the price from a Premier in Victoria, then how is it that 130 back in, say, 2013 isn't now blown out to something like, say, $1 trillion or something like that? You just don't really know with the quoting and the budgetary systems that have been put in place. It needs independent study by the Productivity Commission. But for their part, the ALP has a very much a love for the idea of high-speed rail. The Albanese government is looking at this. I mean, they have created already an organisation for this to oversee it, and so that's called the High-Speed Rail Authority. There is a board of that. And Catherine King, who is the minister responsible for this particular area, the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, she's in Birmingham, and she's been talking with the UK Secretary of State for Transport, Mark Harper, about a joint project. The West Midlands has got high speed back to London, and it's an important route for folk travelling between the northern cities back to the major city and the airport links that they create. Well, the Australian government says it's committed to delivering high-speed rail and has established this authority, and the first priority for the authority is the planning and the corridor. Now, this is for the Sydney to Melbourne, Sydney to Newcastle, I should say, section of the network, and about $500 million of funding has been put. That's $500 million of $130 billion that was quoted for the whole project back in 2013, which is more likely now to be something like $500 billion if you take the quoting systems that are being used. So let's say that $500 million for a projected cost of $500 million is 1/1000th of what is required. Not much money from the government if it's really, truly serious about putting high-speed rail in. And why put high-speed between Newcastle and Sydney? Why wouldn't you have high-speed to Canberra, given it's an inland city? It would provide a great linkage then for folk to come from other cities like Wagga Wagga and to be able to then get to Canberra, get on a high-speed train and go to Sydney. It just seems to me that there are some other options that could be available for governments, but the high speed is something that they're pushing through with, and at least Catherine King is in the UK with the Australian government and stakeholders looking at whether or not it's a possibility for the future. I'm going to say that it's going to be 30 years before they actually completed this particular venture. And if they don't start now, then it's going to blow out beyond 2050. And I think by that stage, we would all have less appetite for it, and there'd be a lot more other means of transport available.
A Flow News 24 update.